To follow along with this course, you'll need to install the brushes and tools I'm using. For your convenience, I've provided you with a workspace file. Once you have imported this from within Painter, your workspace will match mine with all the brushes and palettes you see here. If you wish to use your own workspace, or you're using a version of Painter that is later than 2022, you can use the box files and other resource files to merge my custom content into your own workspace. Please see the workspace installation instructions for directions on how to install the workspace and other files. To make it easier for us to be on the same page, we will be working from a reference painting that I created ahead of time. If you like, you can place this image on a separate monitor or device, or you can load it into the reference image panel found in the window menu. Typically, I do not try to copy reference images. If anything, I use them as inspiration and then improvise my own details. I encourage you to do the same. I have created a sketch based on the basic layout of the reference image. Rather than trying to replicate every detail in the reference image, my goal is to map out where each overlapping object sits in the composition. We'll fill in the details later using brushes to create more intricate shapes. There is a second sketch layer that indicates some of the shading. This can be shown or hidden independently of the primary sketch. I don't always start with a sketch, but it may make it easier for you to follow along with me if we are working from one. I've included my sketch for those of you who just want to get right to painting. However, if you want to create your own sketch, you can do so with a pencil on a new layer set to the multiply composite method. I've kept this composition simple so that it is easy to complete, but you can feel free to add in additional objects like a house, a fence, a snowman, whatever you like. Just be aware of what you place near the edges of the canvas. If you were to print this painting on a wrapped canvas or frame this with a mat, you might lose some of the painting along the edges. So keep the main subject and all of the important details away from the canvas edges. In my case, this is just a demonstration painting, so I won't worry about printing it. But if I were going to print this, I'd likely lose some of the top of my trees and the bush on the left. If that was a concern, I could shorten the trees and extend the bush. I'll also mention that we will be using a lot of layers in this painting, so you will have plenty of opportunities to freely adjust the trees and other elements of the painting. The style we will be painting in is semi-impressionistic, but you may make it more realistic if you like. Overall, this will look like an oil or acrylic painting. However, I'm not trying to paint with any specific medium. I will be mixing media, and I'll use a variety of brush categories. The next step is to create a new canvas to paint on. If you're starting with my sketch, then this has already been done for you. I will explain why I chose these settings in case you're starting from scratch. I will go to Canvas, Resize. If you plan on printing this painting, it would be best to choose a standard frame and print size. I'll change my measurement to inches and choose 18 by 24 at 72 pixels per inch, which will make a decent sized print. Normally, you would want to choose a higher resolution like 150, 240, or even 300 pixels per inch. But since this is a large painting, that will cause Painter to perform more slowly, even on a powerful computer. So we'll keep the resolution at 72 for the beginning of the painting when we'll be using a lot of large brushes. Later in the process, I'll show you a technique for enlarging the artwork, and at that point, we will be able to finish up the painting using smaller brushes that won't cause performance to suffer. If you find that 18 by 24 is too large for your system to handle, feel free to downsize to 11 by 14 or another standard print size. Though this is sort of optional, I've also chosen Adobe RGB as my color profile. You can choose this from the new Canvas dialog, or from the Canvas menu, Convert, or Assign Profile. Please read the instructions document for this course for a guide to downloading and installing Adobe RGB. If you aren't planning on printing your painting, then it would be fine to stick with the default sRGB black scaled Corel Painter color profile. After creating a canvas, the next step is to choose a color palette using a Color Gamut Mask. This will limit the colors we can choose from, which will help the painting look more harmonious and realistic. I know to many of you this process is going to feel very technical, but once you figure out how to use this tool, you will discover how valuable it can be for selecting color in your paintings. To give you a traditional painting analogy, rather than selecting tubes of paint that restrict my color palette, I have simply masked or removed some of the hue and saturation ranges from the color picker. Unfortunately, a tool like this is not built into Corel Painter, but I have included a Color Gamut Mask that we can import and easily work with in Painter. I'll use my custom shortcut to load the Winter Gamut Mask file found in the Resource Files folder, and it will appear inside of the mixer. I've done my best to crop and squash the palette to be more compact, but you may need to zoom in and out of the mixer, holding Control zooms out, or widen it to fit the entire width of the color palette on your screen. There are 3 gamuts stacked on top of each other. While zoomed in, you can use the Pan tool to cycle between these. You need only show one at a time, so make the panel focus on the top gamut for now. Or if you have the screen space, you can zoom out and show all 3 at the same time. I'll come back to the extra gamuts. I have also included the Color Gamut Masking tool, which you can use to create your own color palettes like this. I'll give you an overview of how to use this technique, but if you want more detail about how this tool works, I'll link you to a reference video. There are 3 basic rules. First, you can sample from any of the colors within the gamut to apply them to your canvas. If you have trouble selecting color on some of the smaller segments, feel free to zoom in as needed. You may not choose hues or colors outside the gamut, for example, green. That is, unless you want to break the rules and have the painting fading from winter to spring. Second, you can modify the colors within the gamut to make them lighter or darker. There is no limit on the range. You can go from white all the way to black. You can even just use the neutral gray in the center of the palette. Third, you want to avoid choosing any levels of saturation that are higher than what is included in the gamut. You might be tempted to choose a brighter yellow or pink. Don't do it. You can desaturate all the way down to gray, but don't oversaturate your colors if you want the gamut effect to work. That's it. As long as you follow those rules, you should end up with colors that work well together. You could use the extra space on the mixer palette to place colors, or mix strings of color values, but I will show you a different way of choosing colors using the tools in Corel Painter. I'll primarily be using the HSV color sliders in the compact color panel. If the sliders are showing as RGB, you'll need to change that in the color panel options menu. I'm intentionally not showing the regular color panel because it offers colors that are outside of the gamut. I'll sample a color from within my gamut and pay careful attention to the numerical values of the hue, saturation, and value. If I move the value slider, you can see that the brightness of the color changes, but the saturation and hue do not. When painting, it is often necessary to shift the hue or saturation. In order to do that while staying within the gamut, you can reference the HSV values of the gamut color you want to change, and just make sure not to exceed the limit numerically. I have added the hue and saturation limits to the gamut image to remind you of the reference points. This is optional when using the tool. For saturation, you can choose values lower than the reference point, but not higher. And while the saturation and value have a range from 0 to 255, the hue is on a wheel connected end to end. It goes from 0 to 255 and then immediately jumps back to 0. To give you an example of how to modify a color, I can desaturate my color by dragging the saturation slider to the left all I want. But if I increase the saturation above the reference point in my gamut, that will create inconsistency in the color. I can also shift the hue, but in order to stay within the gamut, I must omit the yellows, which begin at 134, and the greens, which end at 213. Because it is difficult to keep the hue in gamut using the slider, it's best to choose the hue and saturation using the gamut mask, and only use the sliders for changing the value and fine-tuning the saturation. Holding Control will make the sliders move more slowly, and you can enter exact numeric values into the color sliders as well. Another method for shifting the value of your colors is to use the monochromatic light and dark harmonies to generate a range of values. These can even be saved to the Color Set Libraries panel. However, clicking too many times on the harmony swatches will shift the hue, which will cause your color to quickly go out of gamut. Locking the harmonies temporarily will help the color from shifting too far in one direction. In addition to the HSL or Hue Saturation Lightness color mode we're viewing, there are also 2 other color modes for the gamut mask: HSI, Hue Saturation Intensity, and HSY, Hue Saturation Luma. Without getting into the technical aspects of these color modes, there are simply alternative ways for a computer to express color. While the HSL mode is what most of us are used to, the abrupt transitions in hue and saturation do not look natural. The other modes transition more gradually, and the colors stay closer to each other in saturation and value as you go around the hue ring. HSI better matches the behavior of light, and HSY emulates how humans perceive light. You will be able to see what I mean if I show you these color ranges in grayscale. As you can see, some modes will give you more or less contrast in certain ranges, like the yellows for example. Or you may find that a mode gives you a smoother transition from one hue to the next. You can see this in the HSY example, where all of the hues are the same lightness. I have added labels so it will always be clear which mode I am sampling from at any given time. If anything in your palette gets messed up, you can reload this gamut mask at any time to reset it. And the last thing I will say about the color gamut is that you need not worry about going a tiny bit outside the gamut. It will almost certainly happen when you blend colors on the canvas, and that's okay. Just try not to go really far outside of the color gamut and try to follow the rules as best you can. Likewise, you don't need to use all of the colors available in the gamut. For example, I might not paint much with the purple or magenta range, or the yellow and aqua on the ends of the hue spectrum. Now that we have prepared our painting, we can begin applying some brushes to the canvas. That's coming up in the next video.